He got the promotion, he had the pressure, and then he made a call that he thought would sharpen his team's focus, but instead, it quietly gutted their morale. Stay tuned for another great episode of Bad Boss Confessional. Hi, I'm Beth Fahey, and this is Bad Boss Confessional, where real leaders get honest about the mistakes that made them better. Before we dive in, a quick thank you to our sponsors for making this show possible.
Do you love running on EOS? Try Strety, the EOS platform people love. Native integrations and extra features help you manage people, projects, process, and engagement. Connected to your favorite EOS tools and all in one place. You love EOS. It's time to love the platform you're running it on. Try Strety free at strety.com. That's STRETY.com. Strety, the EOS platform people love. Let's be honest, hiring the right people is hard. That's why I love Titus Talent Strategies. Their whole person hiring approach helps you find and keep A players who align with your values, and they back it with an industry-leading guarantee. Best part? Titus Talent Strategies is included in the entrepreneurial toolkit for companies running on EOS. Check them out at titustalent.com/EOS.
My guest today is the co-founder and president of Strety, a software platform built specifically to help EOS-run businesses execute with more clarity and consistency. Before that, he served as Chief Revenue Officer at BreakGage, where he helped scale the company through significant growth. When he's not building tools that leaders love, he's farming coffee in the mountains of Colombia, which tells you everything you need to know about his approach to the long game. Welcome to Bad Boss Confessional, Larry Garcia.
Thanks for having me, Beth. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to get to know you. We haven't had the opportunity to meet before. And as many of the folks know, you guys are sponsors of our podcast, Strety is. And I'd love to know some stuff about you, though, from before Strety. If you could give us like a brief 1-minute history of your career to date, that would be amazing.
Yeah, 1 minute history will be tough.
Okay, 2
I'll
minutes.
take two. I'll take 2 minutes. So 2 minutes. And the reason I'm going to go this farther back is it was even before I was born. It'll give you sort of my mindset of my career out of college. So my parents are Colombian immigrants. They immigrated in the '70s to the New York City area. And my dad was actually a janitor for a gentleman named Donald Reagan. So he was the CEO of Merrill Lynch from 71 to 80ish or so like that. And then he ended up
Mhm.
being, I think, chief of staff and treasury secretary for Ronald Reagan. The backstory is, again, dad's a janitor, American dream. I grew up, I went to Florida State University. I studied finance, and I had a number of places I could work, but I was like, I had to work at Merrill Lynch. There was something about like this origin story where I was like, there was better opportunities, a little bit more money in other places, but I was like, I need to like finish like, this circle, right? So I worked in finance at Merrill Lynch, Deutsche Bank. I met my now wife, who my territory was South Florida and South America. Uh, and I met her. She was a teacher. She's American, grew up in Miami also. I'm a Miamian. But she was teaching in France. I quit my job. I moved to France, and then became actually moved back, became an inner city middle school economics and civics teacher in Miami, Florida. And then Brian, my co-founder, who you've met before, we had been friends for a decade beforehand, and I was about to go back into the finance field. And he said, "Hey, I've got this startup, and if I can pay you a teacher's salary, like this could be pretty cool if we make it," because it was struggling a little bit at the time. And so I joined them as the first employee, and we grew that to a successful outcome. And then from there, there was some portion where we had built Strety inside of BrightGage, but I took a job which will be part of the confessional. Which, by the way, just getting ready for this show, like I had put this event out of my mind so deeply that I was just like cringing. I'm like, God, I feel like I'm in Catholic parochial school again, where I'm like, I don't want to go talk to the priest. Um, and so Strety got up and activated after, Brian and I kind of went our separate ways, and it's been, a 5-year overnight success. So it's been awesome to be building this now. But I've got a pretty good confessional from that period in between BreakGage and Strety.
Well, I can't wait to hear it. Thanks for that really interesting backstory. I have so many questions about how you went from all these different careers, but such is the path of entrepreneurs, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Definitely, I'm
Yeah.
definitely a risk taker when it comes to that type of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So, all right. So your confession, let's just get that out of the way so that you can relax.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, no, I'm so tense. Um, So the CRO journey at BrightGage was, 2013 through 2020, 2021. And it was a long journey. It was super interesting, the highs and lows, from, basically four of us to 40 of us and an exit and two acquisitions. I took over as managing director when we got bought out and Brian had left the company. And I wanted sort of like a not a step away, but like just sort of like a cool down. So I took a director of marketing job where I was like, all right, well, I'll go into this director of marketing job. And it was exactly what I expected. It was like, all right, execute on some marketing initiatives. And I obviously had been under my purview when I was CRO, and that was great. And I've been there for a month and a half, 2 months. And then the CEO basically says, hey, we're gonna get rid of the VP of sales. You're gonna be the new VP of sales. And I was like, what is happening? And it was this time where they were having a really tough time getting traction. And it was like the sort of frothy software days of 22, 23, and that period of time. And so it was like, all right, I guess I'll do this. And I I thought about it, and it was just one of those, like, my intuition said say no, and I was like, I'm a risk taker, like, why not? Like, worst
How
case. And it
hard
was
could it
this
be?
yeah, how hard can it be? But typically it's like, how hard can it be? And like the intuition says, yeah, do it. It'll be fun, all that stuff. But it was like the intuition says, don't do it. And then I was just like, how hard can it be? Like, it'd be fun. And so I go in, and sort of the first thing, so I'm like, went from like, all right, cool down, sort of director of marketing job, like this is gonna be fun, to like, all right, VP of sales, like wartime type of, my mindset back. I was back in that bright gauge, like, we need to grow, we need to execute. And so I became this like efficiency assassin. And one of the first things I targeted was every Monday morning, the whole revenue component, marketing, sales support, stuff like that, had this big like rah-rah kickoff call for the week. And it was like the Brady Bunch thing, like, hey, Bob, like, give somebody a compliment. They'd give it. And like, who do you want to give a compliment? It was like that, like this chain of compliments, and it was a rah rah thing. And I was like, gosh, we could get that hour back. You multiply that by whatever it was. If you multiply that by 12 people, like, you're talking about, you know, 12 hours of work time. Like, we could be selling all this stuff. So in my brain, it was like, this is the no brainer, right? Like, this is the stuff that like Elon Musk becomes a genius about. Like, delete this meeting. It's super easy. And so I go do it very coldly. I just, went to the calendar invite, had taken over the invite, and I said, yeah, we'll just get rid of it. So I clicked it like, hey, we're going to cancel this meeting. Like, I'll meet it with everybody sort of one on one, on Monday, and kick things off as they come and all that stuff. And gosh, I sucked the oxygen out of that whole crew. It was just like I traded, pennies of efficiency for like hundreds of dollars in morale, right? Like, it was a tough time at what I didn't get was me coming in as an outsider to that call. Like, I had my own motivations. I'm a self-starter. Like, I don't need the raw run. It's fine, right? But like, this company was struggling, and the morale was super important. And this was a key. Like, this was something that the previous VP of sales was doing really well, keeping these people motivated for a tough time. And again, I just went. I didn't think about it long enough. I didn't know the personalities well enough, and then it was just like, again, I traded that in, and the morale just got completely destroyed. Again, I cringe just thinking about it, because it's like, on paper, it's like, this is the thing you don't do. Like, you don't kill the culture. You do it very slowly if you have to make changes. and you have to like observe for a period of time, as much time as you can get. And truthfully, it wasn't management wasn't on top of me to kill that meeting right away. Like I'm sure I had the leeway to do it, to keep it and all that. But gosh, again, it was like something that like, oh my God. Nobody goes to fight for someone who they don't believe in, trust, and all that. And I just did that with a right click of an Outlook or a Gmail calendar invite.
Wow. So, did you realize your mistake and go back and put the meeting back in? Or,
The first casualty was like the person who I was closest to, like she was a marketing operations person, and she left the company. And it was like one of the things on her exit interview with the CEO was like, "Yeah, Larry came in. I really love Larry. He's great, and he's put in a really tough situation." And apparently, it was like a an exit interview where she was like, "It's kind of unfair what Larry has to go through." But then was like, "But he killed that meeting. Like that was ridiculous." Like I look forward to that meeting. I really enjoyed it. And once I got that feedback, I was like, "Oh man, what am I doing here?" And then so I brought it back, but it was one of those things. It's like it's never the same. It's like this felt now forced, because I had kind of done it as a knee jerk reaction. So, um, and then ultimately it was like, it wasn't, for what that company needed. I wasn't the right person. And so we separated ways, the right way, right? Like talk through things, gave enough time and said, you know what, like you really need somebody a little bit more organic in here, somebody promoted from within. You probably don't need me, and I'm happy to stay as long as you did. So it ended up being not a great culture fit for me and that company. And they ended up, doing well after. I still stay friends with some of the leadership members there, and yeah, so things worked out well. But yeah, that was so cringe.
we all have moments like that. It's just hindsight's 2020, and you look back and you're thinking, gosh, what was I thinking? And so there's a couple things that you brought up here that I see common scenarios, right? The first is the new leader that comes in and wants to prove themselves, right? And with EOS, there's often turnover. We see leadership team members changing periodically. Sometimes we get a new integrator, and it can be a breath of fresh air, and it can, sometimes it's all the good things, and sometimes they bring stuff with them, tools that are in their toolkit that they want to use because it worked at the last company, so I'm going to try it here. And now that you're, president of Strety and working with companies that are running on EOS, this is actually kind of an issue, right? Because when we bring in new people into the organization and they're not familiar with EOS, sometimes they're trying to, bring in their old tool set, and that can in itself become an issue because they're not like aligning with the culture that's been developed and things like that. So that's one thing. What do you think about that? Have you seen that in other places? Have you experienced that yourself?
I have seen other places, yeah, like the bringing in the old tool set, bringing in the things that work. The thing about like, and again, the hindsight being 2020 is like, I should have just turned that meeting into an L10, and it was that was part of my tool set. Like it was something like it would have been an option. And I just think that would have been fine. And I think, an L10 meeting once a week has that component of the segue of everybody checking in with each other. How's everybody doing? And that could have, kept the morale up, I think. And I think it's a method that's been proven out by tens of thousands of companies. Um, and so I think that was something that I should have done. But yeah, I mean, we see it all the time with companies. People, the employees come in and like, this is what worked at the other place, and it's like, that's not what needs to be done. I mean, we've had that, in previous companies. People that come from other employers and like, this is the way I do it. Then it worked for me. It's like, it's great, but like, this is how we do it here. Happy to have a conversation around it. But yeah, we've definitely seen it.
One of the things that I recommend, so for any company that's running on EOS, is that you have a pretty solid onboarding program to what EOS is actually for the new folks coming in, because it is like people are speaking a different language, and like, what is this L10? I don't understand what that is. Or what's a rock after all, so taking the time to bring people up to speed and educating them and so on. Now, that's not exactly what happened in your situation. Um, and it's understandable. I mean, sometimes we just want to get things going. And especially if it's an area where maybe we're not completely comfortable, which it sounded like you were already questioning, is this my zone of genius here? This role.
Yeah, yeah, no, that was, yeah, definitely in question. It wasn't great. And I think, going into your comment there about getting that EOS training is huge, right? Like this is the template, like this is how the company's running, this is our language and
Mhm.
vocabulary. You wouldn't join, the army or an airline without having the same common language, so everyone's talking the same way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and they have boot camp in the Army, and they
Yeah,
have a way of onboarding people, right? It's a
yeah,
pretty grueling program. Hopefully, it's not that
yeah,
grueling for, companies running on EOS. But I think that sometimes we forget, especially when we're putting out fires all the time or we're trying to grow the company, and we're just like, oh gosh, here you come. We're so glad that you're here. Just get going and shape this team up, would you? And and so people are just sort of left to their own devices. So yeah, I mean, I think that tools like Strety certainly help get people to understand how things operate, and gets them up to speed a little bit faster because they can see it, um, how it's all laid out. So tell me about BreakGage a little bit, because I don't like, for the listeners, they don't really understand what BreakGage was. It's kind of famous in a very, specific industry, but just, yeah, if you wouldn't mind.
yeah. If there's a listener and they have an IT company that they're outsourcing their IT to, they probably know who BreakGage was. Like we became kind of the preeminent dashboarding and analytics and sort of data component for those businesses that were in outsourced IT. So they would be called IT MSPs. And so it's, QuickBooks data, ticketing data. We had a number of, in agreement of 120 plus integrations. And then you had them on these beautiful dashboards and ongoing reports. And it was in the true sense of a startup, right? It came up from my now co-founder's idea and, spreadsheets when he was visiting his fiance back before they were married, and was like, I'm in a SQL database. I don't know, there's got to be a better, easier way to do this. And then, yeah, that company grew scale. We all learned a ton, right? We were all young managers and learned a ton of stuff about hiring, culture. It's where we self-implemented EOS and first heard about it from one of our customers. We probably handed out at conferences, our shtick, our boot swag was traction. So, from 2015 to 2019, I mean, we must have handed out, I don't know, 2,000 books or something like that at conferences. So that was the handout because we were the scorecard component back then.
Yeah. Yeah. So now that you've got Streti going, how is this company the same as BreakGage, and how is it different?
The same and we follow the same core values. So like humble, passionate, good people, and a bias for action. Right. So that is the same. We're definitely still hiring by those same core values, which is great. Different that it's remote, right? We built that previous company all in-house. That brings itself both as, some positives and I wouldn't say negatives, but just some different things, right? So that's interesting, kind of working with people sort of all over the country, has been cool. This is very different in that it's not in just one vertical, right? Like we have tons of customers across sizes and verticals. I mean, Cisco, who's a huge food company, they're a user. Duracell, like we have all these kind of huge temple companies using us, and then we've got a two-person flooring company in Kentucky using us. So it's a bigger spread than we had in IT MSP, which was very ideal customer profile. um, so that's been interesting. It's just been interesting learning about all these new verticals and the way they work. But at the end of the day, they all use EOS, so they all kind of work the same way, right? So operationally, so that's been cool too.
Yeah, I have to share your uh, geeking out on having these different industries, because that's one of the favorite parts of my job, is that I get to learn about all these different industries and what they need. And what's so funny to me is how different they are in some ways and how really all the same they are.
Yeah, yeah, that's what's so interesting is that is there's the little niches they're so completely different, but then it's like sort of the same problem, people, product, profits, right? So that's always very interesting.
Tell me about your coffee farm.
Yeah, so my family's been in the coffee business, going back uh, probably 100 years, right? And I say that where a little bit more like when I'm talking about like the 1930s, 40s, like my grandfather and stuff like that. That it was a little bit more. Think of it more like sharecropping, right? Like not a huge profitable business, just a huge lot to grow, subsistence and food, but then also coffee for a little bit of money and stuff like that. So it wasn't like it's not like we've had this farm for 100 plus years type of thing. In '92, though, my parents saved up. They became U.S. citizens. Saved up money from here in the U.S. and we bought a farm in '92, and we've had it since then. And so I've been going since I was 11 years old to this farm basically every summer, every winter, and helping when I can, especially after high school, where I could have a little bit more flexibility with both the harvest and bumper harvest in May and October. The plant is extremely finicky, mostly because Arabica, which is probably what you encounter in Costa Rica, is more of a finicky. It needs to be hand picked. You can't throw a machine on it; it'll destroy the plant. If you think about Robusta, which other countries that are bigger producers, that type of crop can be machine harvested, so they're cheaper. Um, but it's just such an interesting world. I enjoy coffee quite a bit. A lot around the culture, the drink, the experience, and the same thing, right? You see the hard work that goes in. Probably most of my lower back problems are from harvest time when I was 18, 19. Um, and so, yeah, it's a beautiful culture. It's a beautiful drink. It's I don't know. It's hard for me to get a morning going without a great cup of coffee. And I don't drink it with cream or sugar. I always tell people, is like, does anybody put cream or sugar in a glass of wine? Then why would you do it in a beautiful cup of coffee?
Well, maybe because they're not drinking, the world's best coffee is
Yeah,
probably
yeah,
why.
that's it, exactly.
Yeah. So I want to tie back to your original story about, the morale of the meeting and everything. And I want to go back to the story of your dad at Merrill Lynch and what did he bring home from a culture perspective that made you want to work there?
I think it was like to me, it was like the promise that in a generation, right, you can go from being a janitor and have your kid work at the same company and meet, at the level with the CEO, which I never did at Merrill Lynch, but I did at Deutsche Bank. So like it's that was like that I mean, almost it's like the purest form of the American dream. That can be done in a generation. There's not a lot of countries that is possible. I mean, I would take Colombia, for example. It's a tough country to be in to pull off something like that as far as, economic growth. And, I've spent a lot of time. I've lived in France and in Spain, and it's also very tough, to move up. It's there are pros as there's maybe a bigger social safety net, but that just there was some romanticism to it. Um, but it was important for me. It was important for me, like hearing all the struggles that my parents went through, and it was like, oh God, I think I can pull this off. Like I did well enough in school to have an opportunity to get a job offer. I was like, I think I can kind of finish this story, right? And that was super important to me.
I mean, I think we in America, we lose sight of how important uh, that dream is for so many people that come to this country. I have a friend who's from the UK and we became friends like over 30 years ago. And I remember her saying that they came to the US for opportunities. And I thought, well, that's weird. I mean, don't you have opportunities in the United Kingdom? And she's like, there is nothing like America.
There really isn't.
Yeah.
There really isn't.
And so I just think that that's a really neat story. Thanks for sharing that. That was
Yeah,
super.
yeah. that took a
Um,
lot for me to not start crying. I typically get pretty teary-eyed when I have to share that story, but it's a good one. It was a good one. It was important. I had a great experience there, and yeah, it was awesome. It was awesome. I definitely went to work with a smile on my face, not because of the job, because the job wasn't something I enjoyed a ton. It was just that, like, gosh, I'm really doing this. This is crazy. Like, my dad.
your parents must have been so
Oh,
proud.
my
Yeah.
they were so proud. I mean, my dad's like, yeah, it's like I remember, like, cleaning wine off of the rug, and whatever it was they're building, on the 80th floor of whatever building they were at in the 70s, and it's just like that's so crazy. Like my son works there.
Well, I mean, you are forgiven, Larry. I really honestly don't think that, you need to say 100 Hail Marys or what have you. Um, I mean, killing a meeting, I look back and I think of like all the things that I killed over my career, just thinking I was, efficiency. I killed a magazine once for a trade association that everybody was really attached to. And I came in as the president and I was like, we don't need this magazine. Like, nobody, how much does this cost us? And people can so relate to your story. Trust me.
Oh gosh, well, I feel a little bit better because it wasn't as big as a magazine, but it was just like, oh gosh, Beth, it's like it's so hard to create culture, and it's like I don't know, it's the whole, like, you have a reputation, it takes whatever it is, a gazillion years to get in, it takes 30 seconds to lose it. It was just like that, but with a meeting, and it was just like, oh, why did I do this? Like, I knew this because we ran a great culture at BreakGage, so it was like in my tool set. It was like I just looked in the wrong bag, It was like, or I didn't look at the 2 bags at the same time. I was like, "Oh gosh, I shouldn't have done that." But yeah.
Was it a corporate culture that you went to? You don't have to disclose who it was, but
Yeah, it wasn't a corporate culture. It was a smaller company as well, and I'm, keeping it pretty generic, but it was small enough that, again, it was literally, what I feel like when someone would get feedback like that, like, hey, this person left, and by the way, they said this thing about the meeting, it's like, oh, that's weird. It was just like, oh, I shouldn't have done this. Like, that was such a bad move. And it was just, yeah, it happened. I learned from it, but I let that one get away. That one I let go.
so it's so interesting to me that that culture is an area for you that you're really, I mean, obviously there's a theme here, right? You want to make sure that people are taken care of, that the culture is great, that we're living our core values. You're saying all the things that indicate to me that you are somebody that is really focused on culture. How are you bringing culture into a software tool like Strety?
For the clients that use it, we we've always kind of had this. We love EOS purity, right? And Beth, you've been on this journey with us, right? Because we got to know each other before we had the license two plus years ago with a mutual client, and so we're I want to say we're 99.99% of the way there as far as EOS purity goes. But we do think a lot about what we would call EOS plus, right? It's things that sort of align, like you're talking about, cultural values and stuff like that. So, like, there's small things in the application, like there's a recurring check-in that's just a, hey, what'd you do this weekend? What's interesting? What's a good book or movie you've seen recently? And I think that those little touch points doesn't take a lot of time, but you get to know the person that you're working with. Especially if they're in a different, even if you're physically together, they might be in a different department. You might not engage with them a lot. So to know that maybe they're interested in the same type of books or movies, then you know that when you see them, hey, I saw that you saw that movie. I love that director, or I love that actor. Like, what'd you think about it? And they build a relationship there because of that touch point. Um, that one was huge for us. Another one that's pretty, we're working on now is around employee kudos tied to the values of the company. So giving an employee a shout out saying, hey, that was a great example of being passionate. That was a great example of a bias for action. You know, thanks, Bob. And then tying that core value and having it something that where it sits in the person's user profile. Hey, Bob got a shout out about, being passionate or being humble. I'm just using our core values. And we're thinking through some other stuff that we think is interesting as far as, just to help out in company culture, because it's a hard thing to build. But gosh, when you have a company that has a great culture, like everything else just accelerates. Product, profits, everything accelerates once you have a great culture.
Yeah, 100%. And it's the main reason that I see companies hit ceilings is when there's, a lot of dysfunction, or, it's not a culture of being open and honest, or the leaders aren't living the core values. That's often just a death knell for an organization, because it is the soft stuff is the important stuff. And at the end of the day, I mean, we spend our lives more at work than we do at home for most of us. So it's like, I think that you're doing well to focus on those things, especially when you've got a product like Strety that is, you can get super geeky and engineering about it, and it's all about numbers and checking boxes and things like that. I think that you have to build in the humanity into a tool like that. Otherwise, it doesn't resonate with people as much. So good for you guys.
Yeah, yeah, no, and 100% of what you're tying into it. There's If it was just about checking boxes and notes, like everyone would be fine with just Excel. Excel does all these things really well, right? Like you can do all those things, but if you put soul into a piece of software, through a vision, through the hard work that our team does, it makes it so people that use a product can see a software and say, "Oh, this software's got soul. This software's got something I can't put my finger on it." It's always the thing we hear is like, "I can't put my finger on it, but I love Strety." There's something about us running on Strety versus spreadsheets or a competitor. It was like, I can't put my finger on it, but like I just love this software. It's intuitive, it's got soul, it's got little funny quirks. And that stuff's, hard to do, but we really, really enjoy putting the hard work into it. And it's our zone of genius is just building great software that people enjoy.
Well, thanks so much for being on the podcast, Larry. It's been great to get to know you through the podcast here and through our relationship. One of the things that I always ask my guests as we're wrapping things up is, if you were to get a tattoo somewhere on your body that reminded you either of, maybe not your terrible story, I really don't want to beat you up about it, but about that, or some sort of theme that of growth that you might have had, or maybe it's something completely different than that entirely. What would your tattoo be, and where would it be located?
You know, I went to an all boys school in Miami, Florida called Columbus High School, and it's a fantastic school. You really get um, the whole slice of society, right? It's not one of these private schools where it's like, oh, it's only wealthy, or hey, it's only inner city. Like you get the whole spread. And their motto was adelante, which just in Spanish is like forward, and it's called Christopher Columbus, so it's the whole forward, right? Like just keep going forward. And so I think it would be probably adelante, so forward. Um, I don't know where. I mean, maybe inner wrist or something like that, just like where I look at my watch type of thing, just like all right, just keep going. Um, but I think that there's so many people. I know of so many people, events, and stuff like that. It's like if they just pushed forward a little bit further, right? Like they would have gotten everything that they wanted, and that's
Mm,
in business relationships, etc. So that'd probably be
yeah,
what I would do.
awesome, love it. Well, thanks again for being a guest, and I hope to see you at the conference. Are you
I see
going
you
to
at the
the
conference.
EOS?
Yeah,
Yeah, all right. So we'll see you there, and thanks again for being here today.
awesome. Thanks, Beth. It's a pleasure. I feel like I'm sweating under my armpits, but I think finally the confession's over, so I think we're good, and I can fully delete that event from my life.
Delete. All right. Take care.
All right, take care. Bye.
Thanks to Larry Garcia for reminding us that culture isn't a luxury you cut when things get hard. It's the very thing that carries you through. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, subscribe, and share with friends who need to hear this. Thanks for listening to Bad Boss Confessional. We'll see you again next week.